Hi, this is Billie Beene here with another World News by Billie, episode 32. Today's date, June 29, 2023. And some of the things we'll be covering. A. Allen's vision for the invasion of the U.S. by Russia and China. There was smoke over the U.S. Who could have guessed that? And we have Russia purging generals over the fake Prigozhin incident. Germany moving troops. And NATO still on to begin World War III, July 11, 2023. That's just in a few weeks. Have you stocked up? We need to be in prayer for sure. It's good to be a Christian, believe that God is in charge. Absolutely. Some of the sources I'll be using: God in the Bible, Patriot subscribers, Carrie Cassidy, CRUX, Israeli News Live, Judge Napolitano's interview of Larry Johnson, War News 24/7, Jacob Dreesen, Hal Turner, Steve Quayle's site, I think the New York Times, the London Times, Beforeitsnews, a recent interview by Patriot Underground of Gene Decode, and also Jim Morrison of Gene Decode. Yeah, so that's going on. All right. So I had recently, I had put out a video that the Switzerland military had ordered the closing of a school in Switzerland, and I think this is Thursday. I think that might have been like last Friday, and I had a Patriot subscriber from Switzerland saying which area, and I believe it was Vaud, V-A-U-D, Switzerland, that happened. Okay, and that information came from Hal Turner about the closing. Now, I found this fascinating. I had come across, and I'll try to do a link for this, for A. Allen's vision that took place in July 5, 1954. And he saw Russia and I believe China also, but this is talking about Russia. He saw Russia invading the U.S. from three parts: the West Coast, the Gulf Coast, and the East Coast. Now, I had this come out from someone who was familiar with the full prophecy. I'll have to listen to it again. That smoke, in the A. Allen vision, smoke covers the U.S. And that is what we're seeing now with those Canadian fires. So, and we have this chatter. Yeah, I believe that NATO is still on, according to that intercepted phone call between Victoria Nuland, U.S. State Department, and the government or military inside Ukraine, talking about a NATO meeting. It's a one-day meeting in Lithuania on July 11, 2023, and that was the date discussed and named in that phone call for World War III to begin. And so the chatter is NATO is still on for World War III to begin July 11, 2023. Okay, we have this. So we have War News 24/7 talking about some things going on inside Ukraine. And we have this. We have War News 24/7. Okay. He's talking about, all right, here we go with Ukraine. We've got Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Odessa, Crimea. He's talking about a death zone taking place in this area, a death zone for Ukraine. And that they are experiencing heavy losses, that they've gone forward just a few meters, which for us would be a few feet, and that the losses are 23 soldiers, Ukraine soldiers in this area, plus 4 Bradley tanks and Leopard tanks. And we have this. And I find this shocking. We'll have to do some more research on this. Romania, Bulgaria. We have this report, and it's coming out from War News 24/7, that on 6/27, Russia blew up a ammunition factory in Bulgaria, which is a NATO, part of NATO. So how come we're not hearing Article 5, which is what we've been hearing from various NATO members, that, an attack on one means an attack on all, and we'll just rush in and attack you. Well, if this is true, that Russia blew up an ammo factory inside Bulgaria, who's a member of NATO, what's up with this? So that's going on. All right, now we have this. This is a chatter about an incident that took place in Kramatorsk. And Kramatorsk is close to Donetsk. It's like Slovenesk, Kramatorsk, Izium. I remember those locations from a few months ago. Okay. So it's believed that in Kramatorsk there were barracks. Now we're hearing the propaganda is that Russia hit a restaurant, hotel, pizza place and killed children and civilians. And it's entirely possible, tragically, that there could have been that collateral damage. It's what it's called. But it's always tragic when civilians or children are killed. And we don't know whether that's true or not. What we are learning is that this location that was hit in Kramatorsk was a barracks for Ukraine, also for NATO. There were many, even U.S. military soldiers there in U.S. military uniforms, just a few miles from the front line, and mercenaries. So, that's what we are hearing. All right, let me get that out of the way. Now we have this. Israeli News Live, Stephen Ben-Nun, formerly with the CIA, now as a ministry, and regularly gets updates from the Pentagon, is saying this, that the Wagner Group, so we just saw that with Prigozhin, the Wagner Group, an alleged coup attempt. Okay, so Israeli News Live, Stephen Ben-Nun is saying this, that a year and a half ago, the Pentagon put out this information. I do recall that a move would be made inside the Russian government to have President Putin step down so they could replace him with a hardliner, someone to directly come against NATO in a World War III scenario. Stephen Ben-Nun is saying the coup was staged. and that involved in the U.S. Of course, we had all the U.S. intel, we had CIA, we had FBI, we had UK, and Mossad out of Israel, and UK's intel group is like MI6 or MI5. Yeah. So they were all involved. Now, we had this happen on 6/28. We had Prigozhin flying to Moscow in his private jet from Belarus. And the chatter is that, and this information comes from Hal Turner, this happened 6/28 yesterday. Yeah, about 5 p.m. that Prigozhin flew to Moscow. Chatter is Zelensky, he's canceling Christmas and elections. And oh, the U.S. is going to send to Ukraine its own Iron Dome protection for the U.S. So that's going on. And we have this. NATO is currently training terrorists inside Poland. And we have this. Russia continues evac from the U.S. Now, I think in my last video, I put out that Russia had sent So they sent a presidential fleet plane to the U.S. Now, the information was somewhat garbled initially. So initially it was that Russia was sending this President Putin's presidential fleet, one of their planes, to the U.S. to pick up diplomats from Washington, D.C., New York, and Houston. And then we had Maria Zakharova, I believe that's her name, who's the spokesperson for the Russian government, come out and say, oh, it was just a routine pickup of their time in the U.S. had expired. But now we have new information. And that was, one, this plane took U.S. diplomats who were put out of Russia to the U.S. And then number two, they picked up Russian diplomats from many locations to take back to Russia. So we're getting a better picture of what's going on diplomatically, aren't we? Okay. So that's going on. Now we have this. Right, some more on this Kramatorsk. There's a lot of chatter and information and disinformation going on that on 6/28 there had been in Kramatorsk a secret meeting that had been between Ukraine and NATO militaries, and also that U.S. military troops were there in U.S. military uniforms. So that was going on. And also the same for UK. And this was located 30 kilometers or 18 miles from the front line. And the claim is Russia sent in missiles. First, they were said to be S-300. That's what Zelensky reported in a tweet, which we have a journalist from Greece who questioned that. Let me see. Journalist from Greece. I just can't think of his name right now, but he questioned Zelensky putting out S-300. And then it was said, no, this was actually a UK Storm Shadow missile, and it was showing a video of a missile turning around, and it was hacked into, and then it came out, no, it was Russia. Okay. There's still debate going on about what happened there, who fired, but this much is coming out and is being verified by multiple locations that this hotel, restaurant, pizza place was a barracks, and there was a secret meeting going on between Ukraine military and NATO's militaries. So definitely that was going on. Now we have this. Okay. We have, I'll draw this for you. And in the Prigozhin, it's called in Russia, they're calling it a mutiny or coup, attempted coup. Now this is what is coming out, that Prigozhin and President Putin and General Shoigu and others with the Russian government and military really played the intels around the world associated with NATO. Also picked up from the U.S. about $6 billion, and that this was always a plan going back at least 6 months when Prigozhin began to take shots at President Putin and the Russian government and Shoigu and the Russian military. And I wondered at that time, and I give the credit to God, what's going on here? I didn't feel as if I should report this. I just noticed it. Okay. So then, we had that Prigozhin, he left Ukraine, and he went into Rostov. That's a part of the traditional Russia. This is also considered part of Russia. And that the Russian military leader came out and shook his hand. They had 200 Russian military there, and they were all, you know, not rising up, and showed video of Prigozhin, his men on the street, and they were just buying fast food and just relaxed. And then they got into their vehicles to make a 12-hour drive to Moscow. And the number came out, that was Larry Johnson and another source, down to about 4,000 troops. And now we understand it wasn't Wagner military commanders, no officers. It was lower level soldiers, and they were told they were going to Moscow to do security work. Now we have this coming out about while they were driving to Moscow that Russian helicopters were shot down by the Wagner group. Now, Jacob Dreesen, he's a retired Army military analyst, posted on his website pictures and IDs of officers and pilots who had died. I submit to you, this was from the get-go a controlled fake coup attempt. Prigozhin would have been in direct contact with most likely Shoigu on a constant basis. And if these helicopters came out, who was directing them? The Russian military, had told the border guards, let Wagner in. They had told the Russian military location at Rostov, surrender or make it look like you surrender. The Russian military and government was fully read in. who was controlling these helicopters and officers who might have come out as Prigozhin was leading his troops and vehicles toward Moscow. Was it traitor officers in helicopters who were traitors to the Russian government? And it was the Russian government who shot them down. We don't have a clear understanding of that, but I also give God the credit for my seeing this pattern of behavior that just doesn't make sense. So I put that out because now we have information that from CRUX that Russia, the government and the military, are now purging generals and anyone who came out in support of Wagner. And this includes General Surovikin, also called General Armageddon, who was in charge of Russia versus Ukraine, and it includes General Gerasimov, who was in charge of Russia versus NATO inside Ukraine. And it's coming out that both of these individuals were most likely involved in this coup attempt, or fake coup. And it's alleged that General Surovikin, according to CRUX, C-R-U-X, is under arrest, and that General Simo has been absent from the public for weeks, and he's not been mentioned in the Ministry of Defense Russia pressers since June 9. So that's going on. Now we have from the New York Times, Surovikin had advanced knowledge of the Prigozhin mutiny, and that now strengthened inside Russia in the government as President Putin, and inside the Russian military is General Shoigu. So that's going on. And also coming forth in a strong position in the Russian military is the head of the Russian National Guard, Zolotov. So that's going on. Now we have this. We had a recent interview of Larry Johnson. He was formerly with the CIA about 25 years and did training with the U.S. military on collecting intel. And he was interviewed by Judge Napolitano. And what I got from God also was this Prigozhin mutiny was a distraction. And I had heard that 100,000 Russian troops had moved under the cover of this distraction, but I didn't know where. And Larry Johnson comes out with this. It happened in this area, Kharkiv. So they're right here in Russia along the border with Ukraine in the Kharkiv area. And we have this also. So we have Belarus, we have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Right here we've got Kaliningrad. This is a Russian enclave. And just in the last couple of days, Germany. Germany's over in this area. So I'm assuming they probably went through Poland to the border with Kaliningrad. Germany sent 4,000 troops here. And we know in World War II, Germany and Russia were enemies. And we have this coming out from WIII. It's a mainstream news outlet out of India. Suravikan is missing, and Suravikan knew about the Prigozhin mutiny. So we have that. Now we have this coming out from Decode and Larry Johnson also. So they're both confirming that near Kiev, and this was about May 7 to 9, came out that Russia, they put down a ground penetrating that might have been a hypersonic missile, but it was ground penetrating. It went down miles into the ground. It took out NATO and Ukraine generals, and it took out, now Decode is confirming Budanov, supposedly the head of Ukraine's intel organization, was killed, as was General Zaluzhny, the head of Ukraine's military. They were killed near Kiev. And Larry Johnson also has confirmed that. He came out with that information also on a recent interview with Judge Napolitano. And 200 NATO generals and US, UK were killed at the same time. So this is just confirmation coming out. The Budanov and the Zaluzhny you're seeing are clones or doubles or fakes or whatever. Now we have this coming out from Hal Turner on June 29, that this is Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov. He's alleging that you haven't really seen the Ukraine offensive get started yet. And this is also coming out from the Financial Times of London. It has not yet begun. We have not yet used Ukraine NATO training soldiers and NATO equipment. Not yet. And also that it's difficult for Ukraine to join NATO while they're involved in war. And also the date given in that intercepted phone call with Victoria Nuland for NATO to kick off World War III remains the same. July 11, 2023. Yeah, so that's going on. And now we have this. Hal Turner is also reporting Ukraine claims they have captured 130 square kilometers of land. And it's pointed out by Hal Turner that Russia controls 604,000 square kilometers. And that in this pretend, since this Reznikov says we haven't really begun the offensive yet on behalf of Ukraine. So in their feign attempts that they've been making for some type of a trial offensive since June 4, killed of Ukraine soldiers, and we're sure NATO also 13,000, taken out 259 tanks, and also 780 armored vehicles. And so now a short prayer. We'll use the modified prayer from General Patton of World War II. Father, grant us fair weather so that we may win our battles. And we ask also to clarify, to identify clearly who are our enemies inside Ukraine, inside NATO, inside our gates, inside the U.S. And we ask, Father, crush our enemies. And we thank you, God the Father, God the Son, Jesus, whom many call Yeshua, and God the Holy Spirit. I say to my family and friends, remain steady out there, continue to pray. God is in charge and He is on the move. I love you, and I'll see you soon.